Carver, A Life in Poems, is written for 8 to 12-year-olds according to Scholastic, where this book was published and is sold today. However, so much of this is dealing with his college and his academic experience that I think only those of us in that setting can really appreciate some of the mind-bending achievements that Carver made, both personally and academically in that setting. Can you imagine sitting next to a student who is discovering things about the subject you are studying while you are studying it, and therefore understanding things that no one else in the world can grasp? That's what it was like sitting next to Carver. He was discovering things about science during a science class that no one else in the world knew, not even the professors. I mean, this had to be a sort of world-bending experience being with Carver in the classroom. And when they talk about how students and professors both related to him, I think we get that feeling. And Green Thumb Boy is one, for me, it came across so strong. Because in Green Thumb Boy, we've got the narrator who is the professor that Carver was working with as an undergrad, and that invited him to stay on and do graduate studies because he realized that Carver was making these interventions and discoveries that no one else was making, and they needed this incredibly brilliant scientist to stay on so that they could learn more about the science that they were teaching. So Pamela invites Carver to stay on, and he does, and he becomes the first African-American to get not only a bachelor's in science, but then a master's in science, so breaking barrier after barrier at a segregated white institution. And the narrator in this is both awed by Carver and I think almost surprised at the fact that he's awed by Carver, because we get the sense that this narrator is coming from, and is perhaps not even aware that he is coming from a racist, hierarchical perspective of society. That he is surprised that this African-American student is doing all these things, and even as he is surprised by it, he is changed, and Carver himself, both his brilliance and the sort of man that he is, are bringing out something new and something different, and Pummel's recognizing that he's going to do something he never expected he would do, which is put a student with him on an article and acknowledge that student's contributions, because the student is Carver. So you understand, at this time, professors would often steal their students' ideas and publish these articles alone. Pummel realizes he's not going to do that, because just like the students in the cafeteria who stood up and went to sit with Carver because Carver brought out the best in them, he is bringing out the best in this professor, and he's actually going to change this professor's life. The fungus that they find that's affecting legumes, like the peanuts and the soybeans and all of the crops that Carver's going to work with later, these interventions are going to allow farmers to understand and protect their crops and prevent the sorts of famines and blights that were sweeping through the rural South at this time. And they're going to be doing it together, and they're going to continue exchanging letters throughout Pummel's lifetime. So that sort of change or unexpected growth in the narrator is something that makes Green Thumb Boy just that much more complex, along with the realization that Carver was not working among people who simply lauded his genius. He was having to overcome all these obstacles continually, even with the people who were applauding him. And yet he did this, and he persevered, and he changed their lives. He didn't just change their science. So that is my reflection and reaction, my personal engagement with Green Thumb Boy in Carver Life and Poems. Anyone else sort of feel like that? Had this moment where you read a poem and you felt like, oh my goodness, I want to know this man. I wish I could have met him. Let yourself experience that with poetry. I think poetry, like music, can bring out those sort of emotional experiences, those emotional connections that seem to go beyond the narrative that's just included on the page. If you experience that, think about ways you can enjoy that and then share that enjoyment with readers around you. Don't be afraid to share your own enjoyment, because that enjoyment can be contagious.